The battle against the reopening of schools continues. The One South Africa movement says all schools must be closed during the COVID-19 surge and for the duration of winter. The movement insists that the reopening of schools ahead of infections peak was a rushed move. It says not all schools are ready to accept pupils at the moment. Meanwhile, Basic Education Minister eNCA says schools are following precautionary measures. But the One South Africa movement says it'll protest every Friday until the department listens to their plea. For more on this, I'm now joined via Skype by the movement's leader, Mmusi Maimane. Mmusi, thank you so much for joining us. Let's just talk numbers a little bit here about since the kids returned to school. We had the Basic Education Minister last Sunday giving us some of those numbers, and she said that less than 1% of the total number of teachers in the country have been infected by the coronavirus since the schools reopened, and also less than 1% of the learners have also been infected since they returned back to school. So my question is, are we pressing the panic mode button here from the 1SA movement?
Good morning. And first of all, I think that the numbers that you've cited are such an important reflection, because you will recall that when we went to court on the 1st of June, it was the same department that relied on evidence that said actually children could not be at least transmitters of the virus. And ultimately now the figure is sitting at 1% without really testing the broader teacher population. And whilst you and I know very well that as we head into this surge, we're discovering very quickly that in fact testing results are being delayed, so you can get up to 8 days. What is factually true is that a school is closing every single day in Gauteng. What is factually true is that as teachers are getting infected, we're discovering more and more that they're playing, if you like, rotational chairs. Because you imagine a maths teacher comes and stands in front of a matric class, they contract the virus, they're out for 14 days, another teacher has to come back in. And so for the current crop of matriculants, they could potentially in the next 2 months have a rotation of teachers sitting before them. I think as fellow South Africans, we need to ask ourselves, if the Department of Education says the threshold is 5% or 10% of lives lost, then they must be willing to at least come forward with that and say, in their care, they're willing to accept this threshold of the number of people being infected or potentially dying.
Now, Mmusi, we talk about a lot of these cases are coming out of the community. The minister was saying they reflect the cases within the community, how the pandemic is spreading within the communities themselves. So what I want to say to you is, if a kid is at home, and and unfortunately, a lot of our homes, they can't afford to have to discontaminate like you and I can, and so forth and so forth. So sometimes, as a child safer sitting at home, they're being sent to the shops, they're running around at home, and it's adults that carry this disease or this pandemic, and it's adults that actually spread it more than the kids. Is a kid safer in an environment, in a class, or safer at home where they're amongst all these adults who are asymptomatic?
Well, one thing we know about the virus is that it spreads more virulently in crowds, right? And so therefore, the main question we should be asking ourselves, in contrast to the question that you are saying, is it also sensible for teachers, learners, support staff? Remember, we're not talking just kids here. We're talking 17, 18, 19-year-old matriculants to effectively be going to mass gatherings every single day. That is the question about what actually happens in a classroom. The department proudly boasts about these plans, and I accept they're bona fides of it. But at the end of the day, you need to walk into a classroom and see what happens. You need to see how teenagers conduct themselves. You need to also equally realize that our schools were not built for social distancing. So naturally, what's starting to happen now is that when you phase in more grades, the school is becoming more and more crowded, because if you have to comply with social distancing regulations, you simply don't have spaces for it. So there isn't a plan that says, how do we use community halls, community centers, churches, all of those infrastructure so that we can spread and social distance kids? But instead, we're asking our young people and teachers to go into mass gatherings every day. And I think, to me, that's more dangerous.
Now, Mmusi, you're calling for teachers, you're calling for parents to take back the power, as you said, but you have to have the backing of the unions, and that doesn't seem to be happening at the present moment. National Professional Teachers Organization, they're saying we will not, as a matter of principle, support a political movement trying to gain a foothold using schools and teachers and so on. The Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools, they go on and say your call is irresponsible. What say you?
I don't stand on behalf of unions. If I was a union representative...
But you need, I mean, they need to talk to the teachers. They represent the teachers, and if you want the teachers to boycott, surely you need unions involved.
And they must make that decision for themselves. What I stand on behalf of is the 190,000 parents who signed our petition and said, no, we can't allow our kids to go. It's on those behalf. It's on those citizens. We speak on behalf of ordinary people. We speak on behalf of the poor citizens in schools and communities. If unions want to say they want to have it both ways, where they send out surveys to their teachers who then give them feedback to say to them that their schools are not safe, and then the very same unions are happy to sit around the same table with the minister and after what is so-called consultation agree that, well, we must continue. If that is the role they want to play in society of duality, it is their choice. My choice and my function is to speak on behalf of parents and particularly poor South Africans who don't have a voice in this particular debacle that we're facing.
Okay, so you handed in your petition. Give us a couple of keynotes in your petition, please, Mr. Maimane.
Our petition is very straightforward. We're asking for schools to be shut until post the peak period, which is potentially beyond winter. We're asking for an adjustment of the curriculum so that teaching can continue till late in the year rather than it's been shut down, that exams must be adjusted. We're simply asking that we must take an aggressive stance to give matriculants digital devices that can allow them the space to do blended learning, which is some contact session coupled with some online training. And ultimately, we're asking for mandatory regulation around schools to make sure all schools are ready. I really believe our demands or our asks are reasonable to say to ourselves, let's safeguard lives and make sure that we can educate a child in a number of months from now. And then lastly, obviously, all the interventions around feeding of children, all of those must be executed on a door-to-door basis. It would seem this government is capable of being able to distribute T-shirts and food parcels during elections, but it is incapable of being able to do so when there isn't an election. Whereas at this point, we should be feeding kids at home, and that's all we're demanding.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for speaking with us this morning. Mmusi Maimane, leader of the One South Africa movement.